Welcome to our viewers in this Monday edition of Globespan 24/7. We want to thank you for joining us today as you celebrate in Guyana Emancipation Day. We know that so many years ago that slavery was abolished and Emancipation Day was set up for us to celebrate that day. So to our African brothers and sisters in Guyana, we want to say happy emancipation, and we pray, God, that you will continue to be a guiding force to the development of Guyana. We want to thank Nohar Singh for making this platform available, and of course, Devin Bissou, our technical specialist. This evening, we are discussing a very important topic. The topic today is all about the oil contract that we have been handed down from the coalition government. Now, we're not blaming anyone here tonight, but we have with us some prominent Guyanese who have done a remarkable job in highlighting the issues of the contract and to make a recommendation to the government. Hopefully that the government will accept some of these recommendations on the way forward. Tonight, I want to extend on behalf of Globespan and on our own behalf, congratulations to President Ali on his first year as President of Guyana. As we know, last year, August the 2nd, he was sworn in as President after 5 months of delay from the March elections. So President Ali, we want to congratulate you and your government, and we pray that God will give you the strength and the courage to continue to lead our nation to a better level and better way. With me this evening is, of course, my co-host, Dr. Rose. Dr. Rose, welcome back to the program tonight.
Thank you, Charles, and welcome to all our listeners and all our guests here tonight. We hope to have a very fruitful discussion, and we'll see what happens. Thanks.
And to help us to do that is no stranger to the public. We have Dr. Jerry Jailall. He's the education consultant at the North Carolina State Department of Public Instructions. And I will soon ask Dr. Jailall to give us a brief description of himself. But Dr. Jailall, before that, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Charles.
And of course, we have from Toronto, Canada, the president of OGNN, for those of you who are following that interesting platform, Mr. Darsh Khusial. He's an engineer by profession. Mr. Khusial, welcome to the program tonight.
Thank you, Charles.
And I believe we are I'm not sure if he's with us currently, Dr. Ganga Ramdass. He's a retired professor of business and economics. I see Dr. Ramdass is there. Dr. Ramdass, welcome to the program tonight.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
you very much.
Gentlemen, as I said, it will be a dishonor for me to introduce you distinguished men, but can you take a minute of our program tonight before we get into the nitty-gritty of it, and to tell us exactly a little bit of yourselves and why should our viewers listen to your part of your discussion tonight? We can start with Dr. Jailall.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Dr. Rose, Devin, and Nohar Singh for having us on the program. I first want to say happy Emancipation Day to all Guyana, and I want to congratulate the PPP for its first anniversary. I want to say in the history of Guyana, we probably have had the most progress of any government in the first year in Guyana. So I congratulate the government for doing a very good job. I am from Guyana. I live in the US now, but they say you can take the man out of Guyana, but you cannot take Guyana out of the man. So every day we live and breathe Guyana. We read all the papers. We try to follow what's happening in our country. And it is that love for Guyana and its people and its progress, like your banner said earlier, now is Guyana time. And so we want to be the generation that would change the destiny of our country now that we have discovered oil. I was fortunate to work at the two campuses of University of Guyana, two campuses here in the US. And I've lived in the United Arab Emirates, which is an oil country, and I have worked on two campuses there in the United Arab Emirates. I have visited Qatar and Oman, which are also oil-producing countries. So when we say Guyana wants to be like Dubai, I know exactly what you mean. So I'm also a published author of books that are used on curriculum leadership all over the world. And so why should Guyanese listen to me? Because we care for people, we care for Guyana. We think that now is Guyana's time. You know, we had all dreamed that when Guyana finds oil, we'd all be rich. And so that day is here. And we want Guyana to be rich, and we want our people to be well off.
Thank you, Dr. Jailall. And now to Darsh, you want to introduce yourself to us, to our viewers?
Sure. Thank you, Charles. Thanks, Dr. Rose. Thanks, Globespan, for having us on tonight. My name is Darsh Khusial. Although I was born in Guyana, I went to undergraduate and graduate studies here, master's at University of Toronto in computer engineering. I worked for a big tech firm. We did, sites that run like Costco's, Staples, Home Depot, etc., some of the big e-commerce sites in the world. The last few years, I've been doing a bunch of different things. One of the things I've been doing is being engaged in this oil and gas discussion topic. In 2017, we formed an organization in New York City. It's a nonprofit, non-political organization called OGNN. Number of members are here tonight. Dr. Jailall, Dr. Ganga Ramdass, Charles is a founding member. We have Dr. Tyron Kimaraj, who people probably are familiar with, writing in the newspapers, Mike Prasad, and a number of other members. And our goal is, one of the main goals is to educate the public on, all the issues with regard to oil and gas, and also what are some of the possible solutions. Another goal is, we think the contract, the Starbucks oil contract, is unfair, and to try to renegotiate that contract to make it more aligned with what is the norm when you compare it to many oil regimes in the world. Okay, and in terms of, why folks should listen to myself and the other members of OGGN, we've been at this since 2017. We have written, I think, probably over a couple of hundred letters in the newspapers, etc., discussing various topics and showing, what are the issues and probably some of the solutions to those issues.
Thank you, Darsh. And I met Dr. Ramdass over the weekend, and if he were to give us his resume, it will take us the entire program. So Dr. Ramdass, in a minute or so, can you tell us something about yourself, and why should we listen to you in this oil and gas sector?
Hello, my listeners and viewers. I appreciate this opportunity to join with my colleagues in the endeavor that Darsh has outlined regarding OGGN. I support them fully, and I'm very fortunate to have met them in this endeavor. Now, I'm from Guyana. I taught at Covent Garden Secondary School as a high school teacher, maths, physics, chemistry, science, and English. I taught at East Ramveld Secondary School. After that, I worked at the Bank of Guyana as a research assistant in the research department. And later, I was promoted to an economist, having attended the University of Guyana. And then after that, the Bank of Guyana, I left there. I went to the University of Windsor, Ontario. I did a master's degree there. I went back, I served Guyana. And then after that, I left Guyana for Cornell. Cornell didn't pay me, so I left Cornell and went to Temple University, where they funded me completely. I did 2 degrees there, an MS in accounting and taxation. That's US taxation, specializing in international aspects of taxation. I have 2 publications there, the Domestic International Sales Tax Law, and also US export incentives and investment behavior. All of these times I was mindful of the interaction between Guyana and the United States. So I did those publications while at Temple. At Temple, I had the MS and the PhD. So why should listeners listen to a person like myself? I have a solid academic background. I taught at Lincoln University for 34 years. I chaired the department 2 times, and after Lincoln, I went to the IMF at the invitation of Dr. Chedi Jagan. I spent 2.5 years there. So I did quite a bit of research. And then more especially with this project on OGNN, I was asked to review the 2 contracts, one for Guyana, one for Suriname. So I did that with great pleasure, and I have some background on that. And I wish to share that with all of my colleagues and the public at large. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Ramdass. So, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it there. We have 3 distinguished gentlemen who, of course, is Guyanese for and foremost, and then they also did their part of their contribution to the world, and now they want to give it back to Guyana. So, gentlemen, we know we've heard so much of the oil contract, whether it's good, whether it's bad. The man in the street, many believe that it is a lopsided contract. We don't want to get into that debate tonight. What we want to explore is what are some of the things in the contract that, in your professional opinion, that the government can work with Exxon to modify or to change so that Guyana can have a more beneficial part of the resource that we call oil. So I don't know if you want to start with Darsh or Dr. Jailall or Dr. Ramdass. Who will want to start?
Dr. Jailall, you go ahead.
Okay. So I think one thing we need to change is Exxon not paying taxes. That seems to violate Guyana's law, where you can have a foreign corporation coming in and they're not paying taxes actually, but the Guyana government issues something called a tax receipt, and the oil companies can take that tax receipt and get tax credits. For instance, in the US, we have Exxon and we have Hess that are US companies. If Guyana government issues a tax certificate, those 2 companies can use that here in the US to get tax credit. And so, although they have not actually paid any taxes to the Guyana government and the Guyana people, they can get an additional tax credit here in the US. And so, our Guyanese listeners and viewers, you know, when you buy something in the store, you pay your VAT taxes right away. When you work at the end of the month, the government takes out your taxes right away. It's called PAYE. Look on your pay slip. You would see PAYU, it means pay as you earn. If you import anything into the country, you're not going to pay any of those kinds of taxes that the Guyanese people are asked to pay. And so why should foreign oil companies come to Guyana and they're not paying any taxes? And we, the Guyanese people, and especially the poor people, and all of us have to pay our fair share of taxes. I ask you tonight, nation, Is that right? Is that right for Guyanese people, poor people, to be paying taxes? And the oil companies have a free ride. Even the businesses. Businesses have to pay taxes up front as we go. But the oil companies come and they use our waterfront, they use all our social facilities, our roads, transportation. They come and they gobble up our wharf space, and they pay no taxes in doing all of that, and their subsidiaries don't pay any taxes. And so if there is something that needs to change, and we believe Mr. Christopher Ram, a national hero, he has written that the companies not paying taxes might be a violation of Guyana's law. And so that's something we need to look at. And so we in OGGN, we want to strengthen the hands of the government. We want to support the government to be strong so that the government would be in a position to say to Exxon, look, our people are crying out, the needs are great, we need to reconsider this contract, come to the table. And so the taxation thing is one thing that needs to change. The second thing that needs to change is...
Doc, can we stop? Can we say, well, stop, sorry, I'm cutting you off.
Okay.
But, okay, so we agree if the decision is that we want to change that part of the contract. What can the government do to change that? As you rightly said, corporation pays advance taxes based on their projection for the year. They pay quarterly taxes to the GRA. And all of us who work, we pay taxes on our income. Generally, when you have companies coming into the country, they have tax holiday for a period of time, sometimes 5 years, 10 years. This one seemed to be outside of that. So what can the government do to ensure that after a period of tax holiday, whatever that period is, not indefinite, what can the government do to renegotiate, to call Exxon in and says, this is going to stop at this particular time? Can the government do that?
Let me let one of my team members answer that.
Dr. Ramdass or Darsh?
Let Dr. Ramdass go ahead.
Okay,
he has to unmute.
You're on mute. Dr. Ramdass, you're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, first of all costs are covered by the natural resource from the sale of petroleum. No shareholder or Exxon executive has out-of-pocket costs. Everything is recovered from the sale of oil. Now, we have carved the contract in such a way that it maximizes the cash flows to the companies and minimizes the cash flows to Guyana. But in so doing, they bent the tax laws to serve the multinational. And that in my mind is illegal. You can make a contract to do something that is a wrongdoing with somebody else's law. I can't come to America here and make a contract to avoid my taxes. I have to pay the taxes. So all costs are recovered from the sale of oil resources. So my question is, why not the taxes that are due to Guyana? Why you have to bend it and rearrange the cash flows so that Guyana does not benefit from this particular income stream? So here's the other observation. If we continue to do this, we'll be in a worse off situation than Trinidad and Tobago. When I was in Washington, D.C. at a certain institution there, I asked my colleagues, how much does Trinidad receive? And she said 27% on gross sales. Now, at the same time, I went and researched that further, and I found out that a sister organization in Washington, D.C. advised Trinidad and Tobago to increase their take from the petroleum and gas, oil and gas sector. And I don't believe they did that. So something happened to Trinidad and Tobago's oil and gas industry right now. So from that point of view, Guyana will end up in a fiscal crisis down the pike. And this fiscal crisis has two dimensions. One, it will push Guyana into borrowing, and heaven forbids if there are catastrophic losses from the environmental front and its credit rating goes very low in terms of borrowing capacity, then it will have to pay higher interest just to borrow. So that's the main problem with not having this income stream, with not having the taxation from profits. There will be other problems in terms of cash flow in meeting its requirements to build infrastructure. So there's the debt problem, there's the cash flow problem, and then we're adding a new industry to an old economy of Guyana, where its infrastructure are in badly need of repairs. It is not for free. It would put pressure on the infrastructure and cause the government to shift the burden of taxation from the oil companies to the local content companies. And that would be an unfair system of taxation, if not unjust.
But Doc, what I'm trying to get at too, maybe I'm not asking the right question, but we know the contract says that Exxon pays no tax on their profit. All international companies coming to Guyana, they have a tax holiday.
Yeah, but
Exxon seems to have an unlimited tax holiday. What can the government do to curtail that? That's what I'm asking.
The government has to let me just rejoin with this. The government has to make the tax recovery from the gross receipts from the sale of crude oil, just as we allow them to recover, and I believe strongly they're recovering the royalty in that 75% block amount. Well, if the tax is less than 1/2 of 1/10000000th of a percent as a percent of this last 6 declaration of profits by ExxonMobil. It's less than 1/2 of 1% of 1/10000000th. So when you work it out, the percentage is that tiny. It would not affect ExxonMobil, and therefore ExxonMobil can recover what it pays Guyanans under Guyana's laws in terms of taxes, the taxation on profits, by increasing the take, if it wants to do that, from say 75% to 75.05%, which would more than compensate Guyana. They can do that. They don't have to deny Guyana as if to say these profit taxes are too good for you. Guyana needs it, and Guyana should ensure that it gets it under its own laws. You can't use a law. I can't contract with a law to bend somebody else's law. Why should it happen in Guyana? It's just like that 1953 Constitution. It was too democratic, too good for Guyana, and they took it away and jailed the leaders. This is happening. History is repeating itself.
Yeah, Darsh, you want to say something?
Yeah, so what I want to remind folks is that Starbuck oil contract, it was kept secret for a while, and then it was exposed. And then when that Starbuck oil contract was exposed, one of the things in that contract is the Minister of Natural Resources writes a tax receipt for these oil companies, for Exxon, Hess, and CNOOC. So is it the reason why the contract was kept secret is, these US oil companies did not want the IRS, the US government tax revenue authority, to know that they were getting receipts from the Guyanese government for taxes they didn't pay, and then take those receipts and present them to the IRS to get a foreign tax credit. So that is not only is it, as you know, my colleagues here have talked about, not only is it violating the Guyana laws, but it's also likely what's happening is these companies are getting a tax credit for the taxes that they did not pay, right? And if you look at it, and Ganga has done this, Dr. Ramdass has done this work, because of the different tax rates, 25% in Guyana and 21% in the US, the oil companies can actually make a gain because they can say, okay, in Guyana, they got a tax receipt from the Minister of Natural Resources that they pay 25% tax. They take that back to the US where the tax rate is 21%, and they can make a further gain of 4%, right? So coming back to, you know, I think you phrased the question, Charles, that, hey, you know, companies get tax holidays, etc. The one in the Starbuck is indefinite, right? And the Starbuck block is the golden goose with 9 billion barrels of oil. But the issue is not only is it indefinite, there are parts of it that are illegal, not only for Guyana, but it also seems to maybe encourage, you know, let's say, I don't want to use a strong word, but encourage some activity that is not in keeping with even U.S. government institutions like the IRS.
Okay, before we get into the second question, Dr. Rose, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay, gentlemen, welcome to Globespan once again. Now, normally we'll have one guest at a time because the show is only an hour and a half. But now the three of you, and one question was asked, half are already gone. So I'm asking you to make sure that you cut your answers short and not to go out of the perimeter of the question. Quickly, I have a question for all of you, and this will require a very short answer. Prior to the discovery of oil in Guyana, how many of you have done studies in the oil and gas industry? Dr. Jailall?
I did not.
You, Mr. Khusial?
I did not.
You, Mr. Ramdass?
I did U.S. export manufacturing, and I looked at the taxation system here. And in doing so, I studied under international taxation with Dr. Malcolm Pye from Bethlehem Steel. The entire tax.
No, I'm talking here about oil and gas, not taxation.
No, well, you have to determine the tax loopholes, which we call the mineral.
No, Mr. Ramdass. I'm not talking about the taxes here. I'm talking about how many of you have you done any studies prior to the discovery of oil in Guyana on the oil and gas industry?
No specific study.
Okay. My second question then is this. Governments over the years have always granted tax exemptions to companies when it comes to invest in respective countries and so forth. ExxonMobil seem to have tax exemptions, but you all are claiming that it is not. Tell me how ExxonMobil tax exemption is different from other oil companies that have invested in other countries.
Yes. When the private sector, through foreign direct private investment, bring their capital over, it's not recoverable from any resource. It's through the business arrangement that they have there and the value added. And they are also required to pay taxes. Sometimes if you give them a tax holiday, that's to encourage the infant industry that just came to recover its capital in a shorter time. So that is one aspect there that is different. They bring in foreign direct investment. In the case of the oil company, they borrow their money and recover it back from the sale of petroleum. There's a big difference there.
And so, Dr. Rose, Darsh already answered that question. The oil companies have a permanent tax holiday. And we're talking about a business that involves billions of US dollars. which country you know would give unlimited tax holidays that's worth billions of dollars in a country that Dr. Ali said we are a rich country of poor people? So
Quickly,
you know,
my question is this. My question is this. Does Hess Corporation, ConocoPhillips and them, do have different tax exemption from ExxonMobil in Guyana in other countries? Have you studied the tax exemption given to these companies or companies in other countries?
Dr. Rose, there are some in cases where you've had in the past where countries have paid taxes for companies, they make it back on the royalty and on the profit share. So in Norway, for instance, they tax the oil companies 78% tax on their profits. Guyana doesn't have any such arrangement. This contract is a total giveaway that the PPP inherited, and the PPP is continuing. So they may not be responsible for how it came about, but they're responsible at this point to stop it. So Charles asked earlier, what can they do? The simple answer is the contract has provision for both parties to agree to renegotiate. And so far, I've never heard our government has made a request for renegotiation. So
Mr. Jailall, I hate to cut you. I'm asking specific questions, and I want the audience to understand the specific answers. What I'm asking you is this. Let me rephrase the question then. Does ConocoPhillips, Shell, and all the other oil companies, do they get a different tax break from what ExxonMobil has in Guyana? Or have they got all the same tax breaks in other countries? I'm talking of, did you study the tax exemption granted to these oil companies in different countries? Are those similar to what Exxon got in Guyana, or is different?
It's different. We just explained it's different.
Yeah.
How is different? How so?
Let's talk about Suriname. Dr. Ramdass did that investigation. Suriname the oil companies pay 36% taxes, 0 in Guyana. So I don't know why you're saying go and look at every single country. We can even just look across the border to Suriname.
So you're saying that Suriname, the oil companies are paying 36% taxes to the Suriname government, and Guyana is paying 0, and in Guyana they're getting 0.
Yes.
And this is from our companies.
Correct.
Okay.
This is like Total, one of the big French oil companies.
Yeah, this is the worst contract in the world, Dr. Rose. It's not a contract, it's a stick-up.
No. I'm coming to the contract later on. I'm not talking about the contract right now. Everybody knows that the contract is not a good contract. That's common knowledge. And I don't want to make that simplistic argument to say that, look, we should discuss the contract. I want to get into detail. If you all claim to be oil experts, I want to know your experience and your studies and your knowledge of the oil industry. Now, in the United States, oil companies don't pay any taxes. And I can cite you examples where...
Sorry, does Exxon not pay taxes in the U.S.?
No. Let me finish the question.
No, we're talking about Exxon, Hess, and CNOOC. Does Exxon pay or Hess do not? You're saying they don't pay taxes in the U.S.?
They don't pay taxes in the United States.
That is false.
Not true.
Let me finish my question. Let me just finish the question. Now, any taxes they paid in the United States, they get it back in bursaries from the government. The government actually subsidized some of the oil companies in the United States, and I can go to the Texas Oil Act and prove that to you. Now, what I'm saying to you is that in the United States, where most of the oil companies are operating from Texas, Texas has a blanket law that they pay 0 taxes, allowed to provide employment.
No, we're not talking about Texas. We're talking about the U.S. federal government.
No.
Exxon and Hess, they have to pay 21% taxes on profit. There is no law in the U.S. that exempts the oil companies at the federal level from not paying taxes. You cannot say Exxon and Hess do not pay taxes in the U.S. That is totally false.
My question to you then is this. I said that I know they pay taxes, but I'm saying to you,
No,
have you seen
taxes?
Have you seen the reimbursement they get from the government then? The incentives they get back from the government? It's two and a half times more than the taxes they pay.
The government does not even come close to the taxes they pay. Exxon has been in some form in the US for over 100 years. You can't tell me all the taxes they paid in the US over the 100 years they got that back in some form of incentive. That is totally false.
The US has two levels of taxation, state level and federal level. They have to pay their federal taxes. The state level could go to zero, but the state law, the state has a far reach into the incorporated pocketbooks of the offshore subsidiaries. That's where the state get them back. So the state of Texas would say, okay, you're not paying the tax for the state of Texas, but we have a far reach to get into your subsidiaries where you park your funds and you don't bring it on shore. And that's an issue that is currently being addressed by the Biden administration for a across-the-board minimum tax of 10 to 12% on the oil companies. And our issue will go to that same level to compare vertical and horizontal equity issues in poor countries versus the United States.
Over to you, Charles.
Okay, and I think if you want to know how many taxes the oil company pay, they have to file their quarterly return. So the 10K, I think, will tell us exactly how many taxes they pay. And of course, as Dr. Ramdass rightly mentioned, I think sometimes the state will have exemption from the tax, but the federal government do have their taxes. So gentlemen, let's move on to the next issue. The last time I heard Minister Indar, he spoke of Exxon, 75% of the cost of oil is deducted from the revenue. And he was saying, I think to the audience, hey, listen, there's a lot of money out there. You got to go and get the contract. But I think as an ACC, I think Minister Indar maybe forgot that of that 75%, most of that recoverable will be sunk costs already incurred for drilling and all the exploration and so on. And in my research, I think a very small percentage go towards other costs. I know the government is saying that the local content is where we need to concentrate on, but the local content is pittance compared to the revenue we're giving up, either with royalty or taxes. What do you have to say about that?
You are quite right, Charles. In Guyana, we have a saying, where rain can't fall, dew can't fall. So that's what we're doing. To rely on local content alone, that's a small pot of money. The big pot of money that a country can earn is in the profit sharing, and it's in the royalty. And so local content is what I would call a trickle-down benefit to the country. And so we need it all. It's not A, B, or C. It's not royalty or profit share or local content. We need all three of it. So we cannot just say to the people, we're not going to renegotiate for a better profit or a better royalty, and we're going to try to get as much as we can in local content. And so what we see in local content, I've done a little bit of study of the companies that are in Guyana. In the upstream activities, like you rightly said, Charles, Exxon has brought in subsidiaries and companies they have worked with elsewhere across the world. So these guys have a template where companies follow them wherever they go, and they get the hog of the business. And so if you're a small company and you want to supply Belange and okra and pine tar to the company, to Exxon operations, and they count that as local content, that's a pittance compared to the bigger items we can make money off. If there's a proper local content policy in place, And we are still waiting on the government to introduce that.
And that's a good point, Dr. Jailall, because as I've been hearing stories of even the recruitment of staff is given to a foreign company, and they're the ones who are getting the bulk of the money, bringing staff from all over the world to work on the rigs. Even the Guyanese recruitment is done by an overseas firm. So most of the local content, as you rightly said, is grabbed up by the foreigners. Very little is left to Guyanese. As you said, maybe they supply the okra and the fruits and vegetables and the fish and so on. But other than that, most of it goes to the foreigners.
Yeah. And so GAO itself has just complained that the local workers are paid less than the foreign workers. And so there's an inequity in the system. And so we are hoping over time, the government would bring out the proper legislation to change all these anomalies in our country. We don't want to be recolonized again because we failed as a country to change a lot of these arrangements in the contract.
Gentlemen, we have to go to a short commercial break. When we come back, we will continue the lively discussion. And we want to make recommendation again. There's so many problems, as all of us agree, Dr. Rose and Dr. Jailall, Dr. Ramdass and Mr. Khusial, we all agree that there is problem with the contract. So we need to see how we can bring solution and make recommendation to the government to make that a reality. We will come back shortly. Viewers, stay right there. We'll be back shortly.
AllFromOneSupplier.com has launched preset value boxes. You can now save money when you order these preset boxes, which includes fish, meats, and pastries. Plus also cooked food like curry duck curry, curry goat curry, curry chicken curry, with dalpuri or bus-up-shut of your choice. Plus, if you're too busy to cook, All From One Supplier will ship your meals directly to your home. Now you can order all your West Indian groceries with your curry powder, pepper sauce, or your preset value boxes with all types of fish, duck or goat, and your pre-cooked meals like curry duck curry, goat, or bus-up-shut and dalpuri. We offer free shipping to all U.S. states and free delivery. So call us today at 718-551-3292 or visit us online at allfromonesupplier.com. Travelspan is pleased to announce Curry Duck Curry Punta Cana 2021. Yep, it's Travelspan Curry Duck Curry with an inclusive vacation 2-in-1 on August 12th to August 16th. Special performances by Terry Gadraj, Sexy Marissa, the Tassamen, and the DJs are all going to Punta Cana on August 12th to August 16th. It's fun, games, party, and curry duck curry at VIK All-Inclusive Resort. All you can eat and all you can drink. Travelspan has flights from JFK, Newark, Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Orlando, and Houston directly to Punta Cana. It's Travelspan Curry Duck Curry and an all-inclusive vacation. It's 2-in-1 on August 12th to August 16th in Punta Cana, Dominican Republic. All-inclusive packages include air, hotel, transfers, all meals and drinks from $9.99 persons. Travelspan Curry Duck Curry is sponsored by AllFromOneSupplier.com. Dave West Indian. Call Travelspan at 212-243-0865. That's Travelspan at 212-243-0865 or book on Travelspan.com. Folks, the Nest Restaurant is the place to dine for Guyanese and Caribbean dishes. It is the best restaurant in Queens. The staff is courteous, and Dave, the owner, is always there to welcome you. So for a memorable dining experience, visit the Nest Restaurant located at 12717 101 Avenue, South Richmond Hill. Go and make a reservation today or takeout. Call 718-847-4035. For all your plumbing, heating, and cooling needs, call Zim Mechanical Inc. at 347-456-8885. Zim Mechanical Inc. installs boilers, hot water heaters, and cooling systems. Located at 9732 Waltham Street, Jamaica, Queens, Zim Mechanical Inc. also repairs and troubleshoots your gas, heating, and cooling systems. For quotes on prices and repairs, call 347-456-8885.
to our audience as we discuss tonight the understanding the oil contract and how it can be improved. Is Guyana getting its fair share? With us tonight to help us through that is Dr. Jerry Jailall, Mr. Darsh Khusial, and Dr. Ganga Ramdass. When we went to break, we spoke of the cost, recoverable cost of 75%. Now, for us to determine the cost, someone need to audit it. And we heard the other day that some of the contract costs had been statute barred now because the limitation has gone. Would you guys want to talk a little about the audit of the cost of the contract of the oil?
Yeah, so let me also follow up a little bit, Charles, on something you mentioned, right? So 75% of the oil revenues is as expense. So that's where the bulk of the money is, right? So the first Liza 1, which is the well that came online in December 2019, that's the first well, the capital cost for that is 3.5 billion US. Liza 2, which should come online next year, the capital cost for that is 6 billion US. Payara, which I think is around 2024, that's 9 billion US. So that total amount is 18.5 billion US just for 3 wells. There's already, I think, up to 22 wells in that Stabroek block. The first 3 wells, not including the pre-contract costs, etc., just the capital costs, that's 18.5 billion US. How much is the Guyanese people? That's 75% of the oil revenues. How much is the Guyanese people getting from that 18.5 billion? I think most of that is going to, building the ships, the FPSOs, the floating production storage units, employing the Exxon employees, let's say in Texas, etc., to do remote monitoring for the people on the actual platforms. Those are mostly foreigners, right? So most of that US 18.5 billion right now is going to foreigners, not going to the oil companies, right? So I just want to bring it back to the point you had made is, okay, we talk about profit share, which right now the profit share is about 12.5%, the royalty is about 2%. But the big part right now of the oil revenues is that 75%, right? So we need to change things around such that, even the auditing, let's say they're auditing the pre-contract costs right now, that audit is being done by a UK firm called IHS Markit, right? You, Charles, you're a CPA, you're a professor of accounting in New York, etc. I'm not aware of you or anyone else in Guyana that's involved in that audit, right? So now let's come to the audit of the 3.5 billion capital cost for Liza 1. I think that might have expired already, we're not sure, right? Then there's the audit for the 6 billion Liza 2 and the Payara upcoming 9 billion. So if we're always getting firms, external firms outside of Guyana performing these audits, then no money is flowing first to the Guyanese people. But also we're not engaging, local Guyanese, trying to train them up, let's say, partner with firms like, let's say, IHS Markit. Yes, we don't have the capacity, let's say, to audit the pre-contract costs, although Chris Ram pointed out the flaws just using the Exxon and Hess and CNOC financial statements, the overstatement of about $92 million. But we gave it to a UK firm to do the audit, but we did not, I'm not aware that we included any Guyanese to sort of train them up, get some mentorship, etc., to be able to do that audit. So now let's come to the bigger piece, and that's like a $460 million audit, the 3.5 billion Liza 1, which, as I said, might have already expired out. You will still have to keep going to foreigners, right? So we're in this cycle. We're not trying to engage and develop Guyanese. Dr. Rose, asked the questions, hey, when, did you guys, before oil was found, did any of you had any expertise in oil in terms of, any technical knowledge. No, we did not. But one of the things that's why we started this group in 2017 is to educate ourselves, right? So we've been at this for about 4 years now, educating ourselves, etc. So we'd like to see the government in Guyana trying to educate the people, have them get more of the jobs. Let's say that's 75% of the jobs. I talk about the audit, but there are a lot of other jobs in that 75%. And right now, that is the big piece of the pie. And it's stated as an expense, but that's still a salary to some Exxon employee, to some Hess employee, some CNOC employee, which are mostly non-Guyanese.
And that's a recoverable cost as well, but that's a different story altogether. All right, let's talk about what's the next problem we encounter in this contract that we think should be changed? Dr. Dr. Ramdass?
Yeah, we already identified one wealth transfer through taxes. There's a second wealth transfer that is occurring through the absence of ring fencing. This allows a mismatch of revenues and the costs from the related that produce those revenues. And so the companies allowed unlimited expenses from unrelated wells on that revenue stream. And that puts Guyana at a terrible disadvantage. So if the ring fencing were put in place, it will slow down and phase out the cash flow.
Okay, Dr. Ramdass, sorry to cut you there. We know ring fencing is a problem. How can that be corrected, if it can be?
They have to adopt sensible accounting rules. They have not adopted the accounting professional rules where revenue is matched with the expenses. They bring in unrelated wells to set off those revenues. So you have to correct that.
So let me, Charles, can I add to that?
Darsh, before you go on, that's a really brilliant move Dr. Ramdass just said. That is the convention in the US. Expenses follow revenue. So all the expenses incurred to generate that revenue is deducted, not sunk cost revenue that has been, not sunk cost that was generated some time ago. And that breached the financial regulation Dr. Ramdass just mentioned. Yes, Darsh, you can go on.
Yeah, so I want to talk about when you mentioned the ring fencing. So first, I'll just compare back to Suriname. When we look at the Suriname contract, there is ring fencing there, right? There is no ring fencing here. So I will say, like, for right now, Liza 1, which there's 400 million barrels of oil in Liza 1, we're likely to end up with less than 14.5% of the oil revenues from Liza 1 because of lack of ring fencing, right? And that is because they can bring costs from Liza 2, they can bring decommissioning costs, etc., and they can limit us on Liza 1 for the life of Liza 1 to 14.5%. Now, if I compare that to, many oil regimes in the world, the average take is about 69%. And we're talking about Liza 1, because of the lack of ring fencing, we might be limited to 14.5% for the life of Liza 1 because of these issues. Now, in terms of what you said, like, okay, how can we change this? So we had an opportunity in Payara, which was approved around last fall, around October 2020, to say, hey, we need better terms. We need, not violate our laws, etc. We need better terms. So that opportunity was missed. But there should be another opportunity coming up in June 2022, which is, if you recall, the EPA permit that was granted for Liza 1, Liza 2, they were granted like more than 20 years, whereas the law said it was only 5 years. And we were able, right, through, a lawsuit by Dr. Troy Thomas and Melinda Janke, etc., we're able to shrink that down to 5 years. So we have shown, our laws can be enforced. So, for Liza 1 EPA permit that was given away for more than 20 years in Lisa 2, they were actually brought into compliance with the law to 5 years. So coming to your question, okay, we're talking about ring fencing. How do we avoid Lisa 1 for the life of Lisa 1? We get 14.5%. When you look at many oil contracts around the world, the average is 69%. Well, Lisa 1, the EPA renewal will come up in June 2022. And that's because we enforced the law to reduce the Lisa 1 from 20 plus years to 5 years.
Yeah, but what Darsh, yeah, I know. What can the government do when that comes up?
When that comes up, you can say, hey, there are these issues, right? So the government has to approve that. Just like Payara, the government had to approve that. Payara was a golden opportunity for the government to say, hey, we cannot be writing tax receipts on behalf of the oil companies. We cannot having the oil companies pay no taxes for the life of the country. That was an opportunity to get better terms. It's our resources. We're in control, but we almost operate like we're not in control, right? So if you have the opportunity to not only the approval of Lisa 1 EPA in 2022, June 2022, take that opportunity. Plus, there are already 22 wells, right? So you have approved 3. So 3 minus 22, you have 19 other chances, right? You made Payara slip. You have 19 other chances to say, hey, we don't like some of these terms. Some of these terms are very unfair, just even compared to Suriname, right?
Okay, we got that, Darsh. Let's continue. Dr. Jailall, you want to say something?
Yes, so the government should not wait until people take them to court and they lose. That's not a good thing for the government. So they lost the environmental case from 24 years to 5 years. There's another lawsuit filed by Dr. Troy Thomas that's waiting to be heard. And that puts the government in a bad situation because they would now have to argue in a way that supports Exxon and the environmental problems that they are creating. And so government should not wait to be placed in an embarrassing position where they have to become the PR for Exxon or the parrot for Exxon. Listen to what the people are saying. Listen to what the different groups and civil society groups are saying. There was a letter in the paper Saturday, I think it was in Starbuck News, written by Dr. Janet Bulkin, Fred Collins, Alfred Boulay, Simon Mangle. Those people, they're giving advice to the government. This is what we need to do to protect the environment. Oil belongs to the people. This is what we suggest. This is what we recommend. And so OGGN wants to strengthen the hand of the government through our education program and through our advocacy. We are for our government and our people. We're not saying we line up eye to eye on how the government see things, because sometimes the government march to the beat of its own drum, and that's not good for the nation. What we learned from the contract is that the PNC unilaterally, secretly, on their own, without sharing, without disclosure, without transparency, they give us a very, very bad deal as a nation. So the current government should not repeat the same mistakes. And so we want to strengthen the hand of our government and give them every support and every reason and every argument to renegotiate this contract where we can.
Okay. Dr. Rose?
Okay, now everyone in Guyana, almost everyone who can read, knows that the contract was poorly constructed and highly in favor of ExxonMobil. So in other words, Guyana was shafted. But here's the question. Does any one of you believe that the government can impose a higher royalty on ExxonMobil as it stands today?
Yeah. The contract says both parties have to agree. I have not heard our government say to Exxon, let's sit and talk. The needs are great. The people are suffering. We are a rich nation of poor people. The people are criticizing us. The people are unhappy. Let's talk about it. And Exxon knows that Guyana is their big cash cow right now. They're closing elsewhere and coming to Guyana. And so don't you think we have the leverage right now and they may want to talk?
Okay. Now, have you guys ever tried to make contact with ExxonMobil officials and let them know where you stand and calling them to renegotiate this contract since both parties have to agree?
Yeah, we actually have a draft letter go out to Exxon. And I think letters were written last year, I believe, Darsh. People sent to Exxon saying we need a better deal for our country. They know this is the worst deal in the world. That has the best, sweetest oil, the best deal in their portfolio. Why do we think Exxon will not want to renegotiate with us, especially with a lawsuit pending? And especially there's a global move whereby 143 countries have agreed to that oil companies and multinational corporations should pay at least a 15% tax to the countries in which they operate. And that's gaining big traction. And so that's an international move.
Okay. Now, from what I'm hearing from you all, and I've been reading about, ExxonMobil has refused to negotiate with the government, even though the government did not ask. But I don't know if the government asked or not, and they've been turned down secretly. I don't know. But ExxonMobil has refused to negotiate. Where do we stand today?
So, well,
Kick them out of the country? Can we do that?
we have not heard the government say that they have asked and Exxon refused.
No, I'm saying, so far, you said letters have been written to ExxonMobil.
Yeah.
They have not even responded or even make one effort to say, yes, we're going to do something with the contract. So if ExxonMobil refuses to negotiate a contract saying that we already had a contract negotiated with the previous government, what do we do? Kick them out of the country? Close the oil fields down?
We enforce our laws. We know that the ministry should not be writing tax receipts for Exxon.
When is enforce our laws, Mr. Khusial? What do you mean?
So first, I talked about the law with regard to EPA, right? That was brought by Dr. Troy Thomas. That was enforced. There is a question about giving Exxon and the other oil companies, Hess and CNOOC, 600 blocks when the law says 60 blocks, right? So that is one law. The issue on the taxation that we have talked about so much, that's another. There are other issues I can send you later, references to, right? So you know where specifically.
No, but my question is this, and I want to speak layman language to the ordinary Joe Blow out there. If ExxonMobil refuses to negotiate, what do we do? Kick them out? Close the oil fields? That's the question I want to know, where we go from here.
So what it would be, it would be the Exxon versus the people of Guyana. And so we know that the Culture News and Mr. Jailall has been doing enormous work to educate the people. And they do a lot of articles to compare Guyana with the rest of the world. And so at some point, the people, the sleeping giant would rise up and wake up. We do not see Exxon as enemies. Exxon are partners in development, but the country wants a fair deal.
But Dr. Rose,
Okay.
Dr. Rose,
Yeah.
sorry, if you don't mind, I think Khusial did mention that what the government can do is do not give the environmental permit to Exxon, and if the government does not issue it, they cannot start the other wells. So that might be a something the government can do to force Exxon to come to the table.
So
the government can refuse to give them any future permits. So if that happens, this means they can't drill further wells. So what happened to the wells already drilled? Should we stop them from continue pumping oil from those wells? I want layman language in this here so the ordinary person can understand it.
The layman language is we have a lot of leverage points as a country because we are the biggest cash cow for Exxon right now.
No, I understand all that sophisticated language, leverage points. I'm saying if we don't give them any future permits to drill for future oil, that's okay. But they already drilled. What are we going to do with the oil, the wells they drilled already and is pumping from those? Can we do anything to stop them from drilling from those? I want to answer this question.
Let me
don't
answer that.
Don't tell me about leverage and so forth. What can we do? That's my question.
Let me answer. So the ones that have already drilled. So Lisa 1, as I mentioned, Dr. Troy Thomas brought that lawsuit, which resulted in the environmental permit being reduced from 20 years to 5 years. So that's why I'm saying Lisa 1, which is the only oil well being pumped right now, which started in December 2019, the environmental permit should be up for renewal sometime in June 2022. So what can we do? We can use that to say, okay, if you're not going to stop the flaring and all the other issues, we will not renew your environmental permit.
So if we don't renew the environmental permit, and I'm talking to the man in the street here, what ExxonMobil will do? What we do? Kick them out. We don't need you in the country anymore.
You're not going to kick them out. You need them to talk to you. And so
I'm saying they're refusing to talk, Mr. Jailall. They're refusing to talk.
Yes,
I don't want anyone to say talk languages that the average person understand. Basically, if they refuse to renegotiate, as Mr. Khusial is saying, next year, June, or whenever the time up, what do we do?
we have to enforce Guyana's laws as regarding paying taxes.
Okay, I'm not answering the question. Let me move on.
But Doc, I think...
Charles, I want to know if there's anything that the people can do or the government can do to stop ExxonMobil completely, and they're not doing it.
Well, leverage, and you keep putting aside the word, but Dr. Jailall mentioned it. If Guyana is Exxon cash cow, and Exxon is closing down wells around the world to come plow into Guyana, Guyana have leverage.
So we stop ExxonMobil from drilling them.
We're not stopping them. We're telling them that this is what will happen if you don't.
We're just trying to get better terms.
And if you tell them, Charles, that if you don't do this, and they said no, they're not interested in listening to you, what we do?
We sell the oil blocks to other countries if they walk away.
Well, this is what I want these gentlemen to tell me. We can stop them and give it to other companies. That's what I need. I'm not going around with leverage and talking language that the average person out there don't understand, because I'm seeing some questions coming up. What you guys talking about? We don't know what these guys talking about. Talk practical language. Charles, we can stop them and sell the oil blocks to other companies, right?
That's one solution.
That's a solution. Well, that's what I need to know. That's all I need to know. My next question, no, you guys may be laughing, but I don't want people to say, well, we had a program here and nobody understands what we're talking about. So I want to know, what can we do to enforce our laws? Charles answered the question. We can sell it to other companies.
So how about Guyana starting its own company?
That's another option.
But we want Exxon to follow the laws. We are still allowing them to flare 6 cubic feet.
Mr. Jailall, they're not following the laws. They're not doing it.
Yeah. So
they're not doing it.
What is our government doing?
Introduce competition.
Let me move on to the next question. Let me move on to the next question. Now, this contract signed by ExxonMobil, does any one of you know the lifespan of this contract?
This contract is indefinite.
It's indefinite?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when a company has an indefinite contract, obviously, from my knowledge, if you stop that company, they can take it to international court. And of course, they can win you, because if the contract, I don't know what the contract states. I read it briefly, but it's indefinite, which I know as well. So if ExxonMobil wins its case in international court, if we stop ExxonMobil, what other recourse we have?
We haven't even tried. We haven't even gone, the government even haven't gone and asked Exxon for renegotiation. How are we getting to international court already? We're jumping way too ahead. We haven't even gone and asked a simple first question.
As I said, we don't know if the government did that secretly and ExxonMobil turned them down. So we can't say that the government did
Yeah,
not
but
act.
then
We don't know what's happening
speculate
behind closed
way into
doors.
the future, like 10 steps ahead. Just start with the first simple step.
No, but what I'm saying to you, Mr. Khusial, we don't know if the government did that, ask them,
So
and
why
turn
did
the
the
government
government say
down.
if it did or not? Right? I don't understand why we're jumping like 10 steps ahead. Right?
We're not jumping because what I'm saying to you, you're saying the government did not ask. I'm saying to you, we don't know that for sure.
Let
The
it
government could have asked and they've been turned on quietly and they shut them out. They're not, just like how the last contract government, they hit the contract for over a year and a half from us. So we don't know what's happening behind closed doors.
Dr. Rose, President Ali, in his swearing in, he said he will be the most transparent president ever. If he asked Exxon for renegotiation, the country should have known. Having not mentioned anything, it means he did not ask for renegotiation. That is what I was saying.
Charles, talking and doing are two different things. He said transparency, but is there transparency? The answer is no. So talking and doing are two different, and Politics 101 teaches you that. Anyway, my other question to you guys is this. You guys have claimed to study the oil industry, and I recognize your expertise and so forth. Now, what's the forecast in revenue for the next 5 years from the oil fields? Anybody did that research?
So what we know, so it all depends on the approval, right? So the first one, Lisa 1, right now it's pumping about 120,000 barrels a day, right? Lisa 2, as I said, is slated to come on sometime next year, about 220,000 barrels a day, right? And then Payara, let's say 2024. But in terms of forecasting the revenues, etc., I mean, the oil price is one thing, it fluctuates a lot, right? So it's more looking at how many barrels are coming online. I think Exxon is trying to target at least 750,000 barrels to 1 million barrels by 2025, 2026. Exxon does not come out and say, hey, here's how much revenue they expect, because they know, because of geopolitical forces, it's very hard to predict oil prices. So what they say is, okay, here is how many barrels we think are coming online at certain points in time. And that's what we do. We also don't go and try to say, oh, okay, in 2023, this is how much Guyana will earn. And we can't even calculate that because there are things in the contract that are not clear. And we've asked for the release of the production data, which has not been released. Only the lift data is being released, but via EITI and other agreements, the production data should be released. And that would, if you want to talk about, calculation of revenue and royalty, etc., that type of being transparent in that way will help us, right? We don't know even this year how many more lifts Guyana will get from the oil, and that will tell us, okay, if we assume oil prices for the rest of the year is around $75 a barrel, then we could tell you, okay, here is how much Guyana is expected to earn for the rest of the year. But we don't even know how many more lifts Guyana will get this year because there's no transparency around that information.
Dr. Ramdass, here's a question for you, quickly. What Mr. Khusial is saying, Exxon expects to drill between 750 to 1 million barrels of oil by 2025. Now, if they're not negotiating with us, don't you think we should block them from advancing any more drilling of oil? Dr. Ramdass?
No, we don't want to take an adversarial position. We want to bring them back to the exact terms of the contract that violated our laws. And that's where we're coming from here. That, in my humble opinion, we want them to respect our laws all the time in all aspects. And also, I calculated based on the last half year in 2021, the amount they will have to pay Guyana for profit taxes will not noticeably impact on ExxonMobil. They can afford to pay Guyana and recover it within the 75% cost recoveries, and it would not affect any shareholder or any of their businesses, but it will affect Guyana. In economic terms, the value of $1 to the poor is worth more than the value of $1 to the rich. That's the marginal utility of income in economics. That is
Right,
not
I know.
it's not emphasized by all the neoclassical economists.
Dr. Jailall, here's my question to you now. From what Dr. Ramdass says, we have to negotiate with them. We have to bring them back to the table. What do you want to negotiate? What amount of royalty you're looking at and profit sharing you're looking at, Dr. Jailall?
I think we're using Suriname as a benchmark since they are our neighbor. They're in the same oil basins. So if we have at least comparable to Suriname, but we had talked about 10%, 15%. So if between the royalty and the profit share, and if they start paying taxes, between the mix of the three, if we can talk and negotiate, and between the three factors, our country gets a better deal, that's what we want. Those are things for wheeling and dealing. But what we have now certainly is not adequate when the country has so many needs: flood control, needs sea defenses, the mud roads need to be paved, farm to market roads, bridges, firefighting infrastructures, crime control, internet connectivity for the schools, waste disposal facilities and the NDCs, modernization of government and computerization, new ferries, boats, upgraded airstrips, better salaries, pensions, retirement benefits. To take care of all these things, Guyana needs a lot of money, and a working class government like the PPP and a party that has an anti-imperialist tradition should never be satisfied with the pittance, the crumbs we are getting from the master's table right now. And so Dr. Rose, between better royalty, better profit share, and
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we need a better deal, certainly.
Okay. Mr. Khusial, do you agree with Dr. Jailall, 10 to 15% royalty?
So he compared it to Suriname. So Suriname, the royalty is 6.25%. The tax rate is 36%. One of the important things that we have not talked about yet with regard to the Suriname contract, in terms of insurance liability, it is on the oil companies. Right now, the insurance liability would be on Guyana because Guyana is dealing with shell companies. It's not dealing with the real Hess and Exxon that's headquarters in the US. And Dr. Vincent Adams talked about this. It's about a year or two ago in one of the blocks called Kanuku, we almost had a spill the size of the BP oil spill, which cost BP itself 60 billion US. If we have that type of spill in Guyana, it will, all the things we have talked about, the taxes, increasing the royalty, pipeline, all the stuff, it will not matter. So that is one thing with regard to comparing, let's say, ourselves even to a Suriname. That's something we should fix immediately, right? We cannot bear the burden of a major oil spill, right? And we cannot depend on the shell companies that barely has any net worth to absorb the cost of a major oil spill. So that's one thing. In addition to the royalty, in addition to paying taxes, we should enforce that it's the liability of the oil companies, which Dr. Vincent Adams had talked about, that he was in negotiation with Exxon for them to take on that liability. But that I guess conversation never progressed to actually being enforced, right? But that to me is, that can squash everything. All the discussions I said, around taxes, royalties, that wouldn't matter if we have a BP oil spill, and it's not something we're talking about a remote possibility. As Dr. Adams said, with Kanuku, which is one of the blocks, we almost actually had a BP oil type of spill.
Okay. Last, do you think Guyana should join OPEC? Any one of you?
Yeah, that's not a topic we have actually looked at and investigated.
Okay. Charles?
Okay, gentlemen, I think the discussion has been very lively, and we're coming to a program time. One of the things I want to talk about is what appears in the paper last week. And I wrote a letter sometime about a year or two ago about the management fees that goes to Exxon, where it's above what the other costs are. So there is all the costs that they can deduct from cost oil, but in addition to that, they have a management fee, and that management fee is even more than the royalty Guyana gets.
Yeah.
So what are we doing about that part of the contract? What can be done?
So I said a contract is the worst ever. It's a contract from hell. It's a stick-up. And so there is hemorrhage of income in very many ways. Not only are we paying the Exxon head office fees, there is also a lot of money being deducted now for interest on loans Exxons have taken. And the Guyanese people do not know what these loans are about. There is, the government gets an F- on transparency, and that's because that's the lowest grade. We don't know. And so Guyana's resources belong to the people. The people have a right to know. And so the government said they would set up a website where all these documents would be disclosed. We are still waiting. So we cannot say that the PNC was secretive and the PPP comes in and they operate in the same mold. That simply is unacceptable to the Guyanese people. And so we hope the government would do much better in that regard. And so we need to know. We need them to release all the audit reports, all the oil reports, all the studies that are being done, release it to the Guyanese people. And so when you study the Norway model, they have the best natural resource fund. And one of the things they said, a lot of things require parliamentary approval. So it's all in the open. And they believe in extreme disclosure. And so the people become partners in development and in the governance of the oil industry. And so we recommend to the Guyana government to be as transparent. You cannot say one thing and then you practice something else. Guyanese people are good for noticing such political hypocrisy. And so that must stop.
Okay.
Okay.
Dr. Jailall, you mentioned a great point there in that we are paying interest on the loan, but guess what? Exxon, with its top rating, can borrow at very low rates. And as Khusial mentioned, they are now taking that money and lending it to the shell companies for which we contract with at a higher rate. So they're making a profit even on the loan that they're giving to the companies to drill in Guyana's oil. So we are really, really on the end of the shaft all the time. And we hope that the government, cognizant of the fact that we're being ripped off left, right, and center, will take a stand. I listened to the Attorney General, and he said that Guyana will be the next Dubai. Dr. Ramdass, you go silence. Yeah, he said Guyana will be the next Dubai, but Dubai took control of their resource. We are giving ours away. How can we be the next Dubai?
Yeah, and I've lived in Dubai, Charles. I've lived in that country for a year. I know what it is. And they do have a national oil company. You have the Abu Dhabi has an oil company, Dubai has an oil company. And so they are so rich, they can afford to double their people's salaries, and the people get all kinds of benefits. And there is no poor Emirati. They are well taken care of by the government. And so I would wait for that day when I read in the Kaitra News that because we care, the PPP has renegotiated the oil contract. That's a news I want to see someday in Guyana.
Okay.
May I add this one? I had a student from Kuwait, and he told me they received income from birth.
Oh, yeah. You get money for each child. If you're getting
And
married,
so is Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. All those countries do that. That's true.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So our people, in the 60s when we were young, we said we wish Guyana would get oil and we would all be rich. And Guyana has found oil. We are mining oil, and Dr. Ali says we are a rich nation of poor people, and we cannot allow that to continue. I know that the PPP government is very strong in business, and I hope that they can do what it takes to move Guyana forward. The Kiter News, Glenn Lal, the environmental groups like ours, and people who speak up, TIGI, these people are good people who speak on behalf of the nation because we care. And we want the government to listen to us.
Okay.
Some of these dreams can be realized if, as they develop the rules governing the sovereign wealth fund, they do a split between consumption and investment. What goes to the people as transfers and what goes into investment. If they don't do that, the masses will be shortchanged in Guyana.
Mr. Khusial, would you try to make an attempt to meet with the government to discuss what you guys are discussing here?
You're on mute. You're on
mute.
Yeah, sorry. We actually have reached out to the government a few times, but we have not received any response for a follow-up. But we welcome that opportunity. As Dr. Jailall had said earlier in the program, right? We are not against the government, we're not against the oil companies, etc. We just want a fair deal for the Guyanese people, right? And the terms, like even adjusting for the Suriname terms, analysis have been done like by Global Witness, Open Oil, etc. It wouldn't make a big impact to Exxon. And Exxon right now, they're earning a lot in terms of returns, a lot more percentage-wise from Guyana. Like Guyana is their golden goose. That is why, as mentioned on this program, Exxon is selling out in Africa, selling out in Europe, the same with Hess, and moving that money in that operation to Guyana, because the terms for them are so great. But why should 30% of Guyanese still be living? We're 5 years in since the oil discovery. Why should 30% of Guyanese be living on $2 a day? That's very unfair.
But if they don't want to give us our share, then we have to turn against them. Do you agree?
Well, we have to do it in steps, right? We have steps that we can take, right? So to me, let's start with the basic steps and negotiate. In negotiation, you don't start to say, okay, we'll kick you out and we'll bring in other companies. No, you start with the little things and see what happens, and then you progress.
But Dr. Rose, the leverage would come if the government involves Parliament and involves the opposition. You cannot leave out half of the country in the decision making. The lack of consensus in decision making and one side leaving out the other side is what got us into the problem. And we cannot repeat that mistake under this new government. I believe the PPP has very good intentions. They can make it happen. They have a nationalistic outlook. President Ali talks about one Guyana, but going forward, we cannot go forward at half Guyana and one party alone in Parliament. We need both parties. We need one Guyana. In the face of a united Guyana, if Exxon knows that the government and the opposition are holding one head, they're not going to say no to the people. A people united cannot be defeated. And we want to see an example in Guyana's parliament, where the government can take into the confidence of the opposition. Never mind they try to rig the election. But if you can forgive, take them in hand, reconcile, and heal the nation, we would be a better country.
Okay. Charles?
A great call, Dr. Jailall. We're closing now. Dr. Ramdass, anything in closing?
Oh, I want to echo what Dr. Jailall said. We need to involve our parliament. That is what they respect at all the top-level institutions in Washington and elsewhere. Whatever the parliament passes, that is the first anchor for that society, and they respect that. We need to pass all our extra budgetary transactions in our natural resource through the parliament. Otherwise, it will remain semi-private and be offshore all the time. The money will be offshore, the opportunities will be offshore, and all the future benefits will be offshore. And you never know that there is many a slip between the plate and the lip.
Darsh, anything in closing?
Yeah, so as we said at the start, our mission, one of our mission is to educate. So I just want to say, folks can go to www.ogn.org/education, and you find a lot of materials there, right? And we do have, and Dr. Jailall did do like a 33-page directory on, oil companies in Guyana and jobs available the people in Guyana that those oil companies are offering.
Dr. Jailall, I know you have a great statement there, but anything else you want to add to that in closing?
I believe our government would do the right thing. I believe that eventually the contract would be renegotiated. And I thank the Culture News and Mr. Glenn Lal and Starbuck News and all those people writing letters so that Exxon knows the mood of the people. The people are not happy. We cannot continue to be a nation, a rich nation of poor people.
Dr. Rose, anything in closing?
Yes, one quick thing. First of all, guys, I hope you all don't go off right away when we get up. I want to talk to you all off here, if you all don't mind. One quick thing, though. The Congressional Budget Office reported that ExxonMobil is paying 17.6% in taxes in the United States, but it received $4 billion in subsidies for write-offs, for drilling costs, and deductions for domestic production. So that's what's happening with ExxonMobil, and not only ExxonMobil, a ton of other companies. But that's beside the point. The point is, if you guys just start, we'll talk a few minutes after that. Go ahead.
All right.
Charles.
And tonight we have only talked of the oil contract and how we've been ripped off as a country. But we didn't talk of the gold. The gold industry also we've been ripped off with these foreigners coming in, and they're taking out tons and tons of our gold without paying a penny to the government of Guyana. And I hope our government is listening, because as Dr. Jailall says in our team, I think President Ali is a man of integrity, he's a man of action, and we pray that God will give him the strength to ensure that he can stand up and represent the country of a beautiful country called Guyana. Again, we want to thank all of you for tuning in tonight, and we look forward to seeing next week when we should have one of the commissioners from GCOM should be on, an opposition commissioner. So we'll see you next week. Until then, God bless you. God bless Guyana. Thank you.